order. We just have a couple of things, one very important, one formality to get to before we go to the shell fishermen and women. So, turn on my light. I would entertain a motion on the minutes of the April 1st meeting. Would someone like to move them?
So moved.
Thank you very much, Jan. Is there a second? Somebody second it.
I'll second.
Judy, thank you very much. It's been moved and seconded. So is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will ask for the vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes of April 1st, please signify by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. 5-0. Thank you so much. So since last we met, we had some exciting, and I must say, many, many thanks to Sharon and to Elaine and Olga and Helen as well for their work in putting together the ADU bylaw. And I think I'll turn it over to Sharon to kind of give you an update on where we are and whither are we going. Sharon.
Well, we are scheduled, the petitioned article is scheduled for a public hearing on May the 5th. The planning board should have by today gotten the select board's version of the article, which includes some edits, not very many. And so it looks like there's going to be two public hearings, one for the petition article and one for the select board's article. And I just was listening to last night's planning board meeting, and you know, there's some questions. They have questions, and you know, hopefully we'll be able to work through them without going into it too much now. I mean, it's the questions that they had before, which if something requires a certificate of occupancy, then it is deemed new construction. And if it's deemed new construction, according to the way that Dave Rao and Jerry Parent read Title V, if it's new construction, then that triggers a Title V issue requiring septic upgrade and allowing no pre-existing non-conforming aspects to it. So that could mean a number of lots in town would not be available for it, which we knew, but we did and still think that a number of lots will be allowable. And that's what we're hoping for. So we're hoping that those, you know, even if it's just 5, we've said all along, even if we only get 5 ADUs out of it, we feel like that's a good thing. So that's where we are.
Sharon, for the benefit of the folks who haven't been as intimately involved with this, maybe we can just give a brief summary of what. So it's ADU stands for accessory dwelling unit, and basically the proposal is to give anyone who has sufficient land to support an extra bedroom the right to create effectively an apartment, an accessory dwelling. And, you know, it can be from 1 up to 1,200 square feet, a apartment for one, as opposed to for a whole family. And it can be done in connection with a house, but it can also be done in connection with a building, a business.
Yes.
So it really does open up, and it's what's called a by right bylaw. So rather than having to go through the ZBA or the planning board for some special permission, you just, if you meet the criteria and you have the setbacks, then you just go to the building inspector and say, I'd like a permit for this. And in theory, he awards that.
Yes. it is, a property owner will need to be in compliance. I mean, before they can get a permit for building it, they need to be in compliance with all rules and regulations, including the Title V. So, it's not like just anybody's going to be able to do it. And there probably won't be huge numbers. The other very important piece is that the property owner will need to file an affidavit yearly that the unit is leased and or used year round.
Yeah,
So in other words,
right.
So someone could be living in it, not paying rent, but they have to be in there year round, like a caregiver or a grandma or something like that.
So what's important about that is that this is a way to not combat, but offset the Airbnb effect that short-term rentals have. So this requires it to be occupied year-round.
Right.
And that
Gary?
I see some questions. Jan, I think you were first.
Right, Gary, through you to Sharon. Sharon, do you have an opinion from our building inspector or town council as to whether Jerry and Dave Rao's interpretation is correct?
Well, we've been in many conversations with the building inspector. And Jerry says that he's been in conversation with town council, but until the select board sends the bylaw to town council, we can't do that directly. So that obviously is a question that needs to be answered. But the other question that needs to be answered in my mind is, okay, so it requires a septic upgrade. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if the septic system is not adequate, then we want it upgraded anyway.
Sure. I mean, it's not a
So-
reason, not to have the bylaw. It's just a question
No,
of
it's,
if that's correct, it will limit the number of people, right?
yes, that's my understanding, but
Susan, did you
Thank
have
you.
a question? I'm sorry, Jan.
I did. I either misunderstood or I'm confused. The select board approved the Sharon Olga et al. Bylaw.
Right.
Then you said something
They-
about,
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Susan.
you said something
Good.
about a second bylaw, a second hearing.
Oh, okay, so you want to take that, Sharon?
shall I explain? Yes, so the bylaw that the select board has is what was put forward by the local housing partnership, by me, okay? Me representing the local housing partnership. At the same time, a private citizen brought it forward as a petitioned article. And this was advised by a number of people, including Harry Turkanian, as a way to make sure that it did get on the warrant. So that's why we did it that way.
And do we know who the citizen is?
Yeah, Kevin Rice.
Oh, okay. So we just picked a sympathetic person and
Well, we actually can't say that, Susan, but we can say that an interested citizen came forth.
and
They
that
said
interested citizen presented the exact same bylaw.
Yes,
Okay. Good.
yes, although our version that went to the select board has gone through a few edits that happened at the select board meeting. Nothing that changes the intent, just some wording.
Okay.
So Sharon, I guess my question would be just from a strategic point of view. Is if the question about the CO, the certificate of occupancy, is the critical tripwire for the septic, does it have to have a CO for each ADU, number one? And number two, does it really mean that if it has to have a CO, that it triggers a septic rebuild?
Well, I don't know about septic rebuild because I don't know, maybe someone has a pretty new septic system. And maybe it's entirely up to date. So that might not require any changes to their septic system.
So it may behoove us to make, I know that Mike DeVasto is a advocate for this as well as I think everyone on the select board. Just
Mhm.
FYI for everyone's benefit. So Sharon, on behalf of the partnership, went before the select board, I think on the 13th, and asked for this to be placed on the warrant. So that's what triggers this. And as a part of that process, it has to have a planning board hearing. So we've triggered the
Yes.
necessary steps and they are going forward with that. But it seems to me that it would behoove us to get an opinion from town council before the planning board meeting so that we can say town council says X. And I think you have
Well-
enough support on the select board to ask them to ask that question.
Okay, well, I can ask Helen to do
Okay.
that. You know, as you know, the select board is like up to their eyes right now. They're pretty,
We're
I
not-
think overwhelmed might be the right answer, but
We're not asking them actually to do anything, only to make a request. And in fact, you could ask that, you could, I don't know if Rebecca's still on here, but you could talk to Rebecca Eldridge tomorrow or try to talk to Becca Slick, our new ATA, and ask them the same thing.
you know, I'll talk to Rebecca first, I
Okay,
think, because she's an easy person to talk to.
right.
And she may or may not have the answer to that, though.
Sure.
But I think it's part of the Title V definition, not a town requirement.
Right. But again, rather than taking our supposition, let's see if we can't get clarity. I'm sorry, Elaine, I saw you. You're muted, Elaine.
Harry Turkanian is waiting to get in. So you as host have to click on the participants at the bottom of the screen and then let him in.
Waiting to get in, admit.
Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you.
And just to finish clarifying my questions,
Yes, thank you, Susan.
does the citizens article, did that also have to go to the select board and get approved?
Yes, and it's almost like 2 tracks, Susan.
Right.
So now these have separated and they have to go through their own process. On the floor of town meeting, even though they may both be there and be very similar, after we resolve the one that the select board has endorsed, then the petitioners could opt to remove theirs.
So they did not act on the petitioned article.
Petition article goes to the warrant by definition. So if it gets enough citizens signatures, then you can petition for anything virtually at town meeting.
Got it. Thank you.
And it's, if you will, it's like a hedge.
Yeah.
So Harry, we just came in. Welcome. The question was, if something requires a certificate of occupancy, does it necessarily trip the requirement for a septic rebuild?
The building permit decision would trigger that.
So if
Yeah,
the
but-
housing, I'm sorry.
So the application for a building permit would trigger that requirement.
So automatically would.
Yes.
Right.
As long as it's a permit for something that requires a certificate of occupancy. So if it's a permit for a shed, no.
Anything that requires a building permit for occupancy will
Right.
trigger a septic inspection. If there isn't a recent one on file, it's adequate, yeah.
All right. So you have a good feel for that, but it still couldn't hurt to get the definitive word on that so that you will know and be able to say, town council says.
It's in the
Yep.
state sanitary
Yeah.
code, so.
And Harry, the 2 chamber, if you're adding an occupancy for someone that is not in your family or household, then does it trigger the 2 chamber septic system?
I don't think so. You know, septic capacity is based on occupancy. It's not based on relationship. So, you know, 2 bedrooms, 2 persons per bedroom, 4 bedrooms, you need a septic system that will meet the daily flow requirement for 8 people. And, you know, the relationships
I
don't matter.
think, I think Dave Rowell is disagreeing with that. So
Okay, well.
that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of.
Well, you have to look at the flow calculation requirements in the state sanitary code, and
Mhm.
there's nothing that treats, you know, cousins and nieces and nephews differently from strangers.
Right.
Perfect. And,
And it doesn't make any sense that they should.
Mm.
Because you get the same load from an individual regardless of, you know, who they're related to and what the relationship is.
and in terms of going forward, Sharon, you have checked with Hillary on her position?
Yeah, Helen has multiple times, and I haven't gone directly to Hillary yet.
It might behoove you just to write something so you have something definitive as opposed to he
Mhm.
says, she says, you know,
Yep.
kind of thing. All right, so for everyone's benefit, the key first date is the 5th of May, Cinco de Mayo, at 7 o'clock. I hope you will all come to the planning board meeting. Is it the first thing on the agenda or is it the only thing on the agenda?
I think it's the only thing on the agenda.
Terrific. So hopefully we won't have to wait too long and come and support it. And I think there are quite a few folks. Olga, I don't want to know if you want to speak to this, but I think it has support on the planning board as well.
I'm not convinced. I was at the planning board meeting last night, did not want to entertain sending questions to the town council
They did
until
not.
until the hearing, and then they would collect them and get one big list. But they also certain people reaffirm their understanding that Title V dictated what we could and couldn't do. And there are many people, including myself, who disagree with that. So I thought we ought to have it answered before the hearing.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going to happen. It's not overwhelmingly supported.
All right. So again, all the more reason for us to get a clear answer, and one, honestly, that we can point to and say, here is what town council said, or here's what the health agent said.
I'm sorry to keep asking these wealthy
No.
procedural questions, but if the planning board votes no, what, is it dead or no?
Planning board has to vote up or down whether they approve it or not, and they're not supposed to make any edits. However, I think when it's coming from the select board, they may have to do a report. So there'll be something may happen with that. I don't know what will happen.
But if they vote
Well-
no, it still goes to the town meeting.
Yeah, town meeting will then, if they get the message that they vote no in time for the printing of the warrant, it will say planning board voted 0 to 5 or whatever. And if the meeting gets continued or it gets somehow delayed, then there will be an announcement at town meeting when that warrant article comes up. They say, here's the latest, the planning board says XYZ, you know.
And historically, if they are against something, can it pass?
I don't,
Why don't we ask Harry to comment on it?
Yeah, the planning board's role in this is to hold a public hearing and issue a report. And that report can recommend that the bylaw be approved, that it not be approved, that it be approved with changes. But they don't have the power to say, no, town meeting can't consider this. All they can do is bring a report with their recommendation. And that report can be written or oral, depending on the timing of the thing. If they're going to hold a hearing on May 5th, they probably should have a written report before town meeting because that's a month away. But that's what it is. It's a recommend with or without recommended changes. It's not a veto power.
And it, at this point, since it's been passed by the select board, unless they were to take it back, it is likely to appear on the warrant, which it has to go
Oh, yeah.
pretty soon to the printer.
It
Yeah,
has to
that's
be on the
true.
warrant because it's a petitioned article.
Well, the petition article, but I'm also talking about the one that we, the housing partnership, have brought forward.
Yeah, I think they've already voted to place the Housing Partnerships article on the warrant.
I think you're right.
They
So-
did, yeah.
And I had a discussion with Rebecca Eldridge this afternoon, and the LHP proposal will appear on the warrant before the petitioned article. So the
Super.
one that's been massaged by the selectmen and the planning board will appear first. And then if that is approved by the voters, the other one will just be no action taken.
Withdrawn.
Well, it doesn't have to be,
No.
I don't think you can withdraw it. Once it's
Really?
on the warrant, it's there. It's a one-way street. But the town meeting can decide to take no action.
Okay, so that is where the ADU, by, I would add one last thing, and I don't know what happened at the select board meeting on Tuesday night. But the wastewater committee was proposing support for an innovative and alternative septic system, an IA system. I'll let Harry talk in a minute, but if in fact you have one, it gives you a density bonus. So it's possible that you would add a bedroom if you were to put one of those on. I'm sorry, Harry, go ahead.
Yeah, there was a very long discussion, part of which happened while I was still in the meeting, part of which happened after I left. But the discussion really, the select board is very supportive of their efforts. But they wanted to break it down into its component pieces so that the voters would have the option to choose some, but not necessarily all of the programs. Was the subject of a lot of discussion. I spoke and said, I was a little bit concerned that the decision to bundle everything together meant the 95 Lawrence Road project was held hostage to the possibility that some parts of this program might find disfavor with the voters and the whole thing might go out with the bathwater. So I said, there's another constituency out here, the 95 Lawrence Road Task Force, that really should have a say in how this is presented to the town meeting, because I would hate to see that project die because this was not presented in a way that makes sense to the voters. The other thing is, Kurt in his presentation referenced using $500,000 from the short-term rental tax as part of the funding mechanism for this. And I said, we have to take issue with that because of the reasons that we've discussed in the Affordable Housing Trust meeting, that it's a revenue source that's tied directly to the problem and hasn't been previously encumbered. So it should be used for addressing the housing problem. They have other resources, we do not.
And so Harry, was it continued to a future meeting?
Well, what happened was Ryan Curley had taken it upon himself to redraft this as 4 or 5 separate articles, and they noodled around trying to edit those on the fly, and I think it will come back up at this evening's select board meeting.
Okay.
Not
For
sure.
those
but
who, anyway, with regard to the financial support for anyone interested in putting in the higher density septic system, the IA system, I think the discussion is around, should it be open to everyone, which is residents and non-residents alike, or should it be
Yeah,
restricted?
I mean,
in
there
some
was
way?
some discussion. Yeah, there was some discussion at the Housing Trust about, does it make sense to extract, $12,000 in short-term rental tax from somebody and then give it right back to them in a septic subsidy?
Right.
Aren't we encouraging the behavior that we don't want to encourage by doing that?
But I take it back. I apologize. It's a supposition, and we will see what happens with the wastewater issues on the town warrant. But it's possible that whether you get some financial support, and the support is not huge. It's, I think, $10,000 per household or 12,000.
Yeah.
But if you were to put one in, you might be able to then have enough density to support an ADU. That's the only place I was going with that. Any other comments or questions about the ADU? It's really important for many folks, and potentially for the shellfishing community, which we're going to get to next. But any other issues on the ADU or questions? Gave me a call. And you both represent the Shellfishing Advisory Board?
That's correct.
Okay. And so, so the question is, what is the situation with regard, we have heard stories about people being in jeopardy of losing their grant because they have rented and that the places they rent, the houses, have been essentially sold out from under them, and they no longer have the residency required by the grant. So that's the first question. And then the other is, what can we in housing do to help with whatever the problem may be? So Becca, do you want to kind of talk to that, or Tom?
Sure. So we're working on drafting a change to our bylaws that would enable people to have a grace period if the situation you're talking about happens. So if they lose their housing through no fault of their own, they would have a couple of months, maybe up to 18 months, to find housing in Wellfleet. Because otherwise, yes, if you don't live in Wellfleet, you lose your license to shellfish, you can lose your shellfish farming, you can lose your fishing license if you're working on a boat. All of this is after you have spent years living in Wellfleet and establishing residency in order to get a license.
And is the same true for people who are so-called wild shellfishermen as well, as opposed to those who have a grant?
That's correct.
So there are a lot of people who make a living and don't have a grant.
Yep.
Okay, and still need to live in town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Gary,
Go ahead, Tom.
what Rebecca has said is we spent two meetings on the whole concept of domicile.
Right.
And here's these individuals losing their housing, and now the bylaws basically say they lose their income, they lose their living. So that's why Becca and the team have basically spent a couple meetings on the extension of the domicile issue to possibly 18 months. And I think, Becca, the select board is going to vote on that April 27th.
I believe so.
Yeah.
But even if they change it from, how does it work now? Is it if you lose your address, then do you automatically lose your license, or do you have a grace period?
There's no grace period right now.
Okay.
So yes, you would be losing your licenses and your income at the same time, your housing.
Okay. So the question becomes, how big a problem is it? Are we talking about 2 people, 10 people? Can you size it for us?
Some of this happens every year, and we have lost people and had them come back into town and try to reestablish their businesses. But right now, because the housing market has gotten so bad so quickly, we're looking at families potentially losing their rentals.
Okay.
So it's not just 1 or 2 people, it could be whole families, it could be affecting the school systems, how many people are in each grade, it could be affecting quite a lot more than just a couple of single guys out there picking oysters.
So it has a big ripple effect on the community.
Yeah. I mean, Gary, I think it's a ripple effect. I think it's just beginning. I mean, think about it for a moment. You can rent your property out for July and August and make $4,000 to $5,000 a week, while you rent it out full year, making $1,700 a month.
Right.
What would you rather do? The reason we're here, number one, is we want you to, and your team, and I see Michelle from Spats here. We would like you to spend some time with us in our community so everybody knows what you guys are offering up. I think you got a lot of good programs, rental
Sure, I think
assistance,
that's-
housing assistance. So we could talk about that later.
No, I think
but-
we're more than happy to talk about that just in a second. I only have one other question in terms of sizing the problem. And I asked, I think both you and Becca, is there, can we speak to the average income of the person? The reason I asked that question is that so many of our programs are tied to income
Yeah.
qualification. And I'll give you some numbers and you tell me if this makes sense or not. Right now, there are a number of programs that we have that are tied to 80% of the Barnstable County median income. And the median income is expressed by the number of people in the household. But right now at 80%, if you are a single individual, you have to make under 54,000. If you are two person, 62,000. Actually, this is where if you are family, two wage earners with some kids, you actually get a bonus here. So if you have three people in your family, it's 70,000. And if you have four people in your family, it's 77,000. So we have a number of programs that we can use to help support folks, but it's for people making less than 80,000, 80% of the median income. Does that fit your profile to most of the people who are impacted in the $50,000 to $70,000 range?
I think the income is higher than that.
Yeah.
I think that's where we're hitting that problem, is that there's no help for the people who are making a decent living but can't afford to live in Wellfleet.
Yeah.
And now there's no rentals to top it off.
Yeah, exactly right. We have essentially zero occupancy rate, maybe even negative. But
Yeah.
okay. I'm
And
sorry.
then Gary, is that net? Is that net income? Not
That-
gross, right?
That's gross income.
Yes, because I think Becca will help me here, but these individuals also have a lot of equipment charges,
Right.
The trucks they got to buy, et cetera, to keep their businesses going. So they can make 115,000 a year, but their net after all the things they got to write off is probably in the $70,000 range, and I'm just using a couple examples of people that I talked to over the last couple of days.
So if we look at, let's say for the sake of argument, if we look at the programs that are available for income below 80% of median county income. Okay, in that 55 to 70,000. And I'm sorry, if I may have misspoke, Tom. So in the case of a self-employed person, like a shell fisherman, then it would be net, not
Okay,
gross.
all right, good.
So certainly their expenses would come down. The other caveat is that some of them have an asset qualification, and so you can't have assets more than $75,000, but this doesn't include, like your car is not included in the 75,000. So it's just business equipment. If you had more than $75,000 worth of business equipment, then you might trip another qualification.
Okay.
But and Elaine and Harry are here, and they can certainly chime in on this. But for instance, if it would help people that are at 80% or less of median income, we have a rental assistance program. So we could provide some additional subsidy on a monthly basis, and it can extend for a couple of years. If that would help keep people in their apartments, in their houses, or help them to find another one. I know the difficulty is finding another one, but is some of it just pressure that if they could pay more, they could stay?
It's possible.
Okay. So that's an offer we have, and that's a program that is administered by the Housing Authority, and Elaine McElroy is the chair of that. And we in fact have one that is specific and more lenient, that is called the COVID Emergency Housing Assistance. And so that, Elaine, if I'm not mistaken, that goes up to 100%.
Basically, any of the rental assistance that's funded with community preservation funds can go up to 100%.
100%. Okay. So if you just add 20% onto the numbers I gave you before, roughly. So, you know, if we're talking about 50 to 70, now we're talking about 60 to 85 or something like that in terms of net income. And we do have, that's funded with community preservation money, which is, you know, an override on new real estate. So it's really Wellfleet residents' money, Wellfleet citizens' money. And it was approved in September specifically for, and you have to certainly say that the increase in housing is a direct impact of COVID. So we can provide monthly subsidies for certain people. That if additional couple $100 a month or whatever it may be would help them to stay in their home, we, the Housing Authority, could provide that. Anything you would add to that, Elaine?
Well, just as you're saying, we have all these categories that people have to
Yes.
fit in. The rent has to be, it can't be over a certain amount either. You know, it has to go by the fair market rents. So that's another little juggling piece. I don't know what those are exactly right now.
We don't set those. Those are set actually by the federal government, by HUD.
Okay.
But they're pretty liberal. I mean, I want to say that for a one bedroom, it's around $1,000 a month, or $1,100 a month for a one bedroom, and $1,200 or $1,300 a month for a two bedroom. And we can get you those specific amounts. But both of those programs are administered for us by the Homeless Prevention Council, HPC. So if anyone has, if any of your members would be assisted by that and are really impacted by the COVID or the short-term rise in housing, they could come to the Housing Authority through Elaine, or they could go to Homeless Prevention Council and ask them about those programs and whether or not they qualify. So that's specific dollars. Short term, we have the funds in hand now that we can provide that.
And Gary,
Yes, Harry.
just looking to the future
Mhm.
is one of the things that we have asked for this town meeting is to expand the authority of the Affordable Housing Trust
Right.
to support housing for moderate income people, which we define as up to 125% of area median income. That authorization is also subject to us finding funds to fund that, because a lot of the funding sources that we currently have are restricted to AMI or some fraction of AMI, but we're trying to build the capacity to the authority and the capacity to support people above 100% of AMI as well, because we recognize that there are circumstances where there are a lot of families that fall above AMI but still have a very long reach to find either available rental or available home ownership opportunities. So that's for the future.
Right. So, but there is actually a really, so where we get the money today, most of the money that goes to programs that we have any discretion over, as opposed to ones that come down from the state or the feds, come from the Community Preservation Committee, or Act, which is an override on your real estate taxes plus a state matching amount. And it's not an inconsiderable amount of money. the town gets in the vicinity of $600,000 a year in funds that have to be used in various ways. But there are some new ways that we're getting money, and that is in the short-term rental tax, the quote-unquote B&B tax, which you may have heard about. And
Mhm.
that this town is getting considerable income from that, upwards above $500,000 a year. And one of the things that we have discussed with the select board is that one doesn't have an income limitation tied to it. And we have a request into the select board to designate 80% of that money to affordable housing, which would absolutely impact the shellfishing community, because it's money that we could use more flexibly to meet the needs of the shellfishing community. We don't have it now, so I don't mean to mislead you.
Mhm.
But there is a third pot of money, and that is donations. And you may or may not know, but the housing gets a fair amount of donations each year. I think last year, I'll throw out a ballpark number, but I think we got around $50,000 in cumulative donations from various sources. And that donation money doesn't have restrictions related. And AMI is the adjusted median income that Harry mentioned. That's the numbers 55 to 70 that I was using before,
Mhm.
the AMI. But so we do have some money. If you have a program, if you have a need, and you want to come to us and say, what we really need is X. We really need support for more in the nature of $1,000 a month for shellfishing and for X period of time until we ride out this crisis. And so we have some discretion on what we could do. What we really need is specifics about what it is you need or what it is that would help folks get over the hump.
Okay.
All right, that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, go back and maybe go back and ask, or noodle around and say, guys, what we really need is this.
Mhm.
Longer term, we are looking at, can we build homes? What can we do for home ownership? We've got a great project going at 95 Lawrence. I'm sure all of you have heard of it, but to be fair, 95 Lawrence will have many income restrictions. And it's likely the most that we will be able, since it uses federal funding, state and federal funding, they dictate what the income requirements are. And it's likely that the most will be at the 90% of AMI. That's like the big project that's now being occupied at Nauset Green in Eastham. That's how high they got.
Okay.
We're likely to get something along those lines.
When thinking about what kind of housing would help for fishermen and shellfish folk,
Right.
having a place to store their gear in
Yeah.
the winter is very helpful. So I'm thinking about the green in Eastham, and there's nowhere to store anything.
No. And honestly, Becca, there won't be at 95 Lawrence either.
Okay.
The amount of storage we're talking about is closet size
Right.
or small shed size, not.
Right. We need yard space, or we
Yeah,
need a
right.
place designated in the town to be rented out affordably for storing winter equipment in a safe manner.
I don't want, and I also want to kind of give you the 95 Lawrence, if all goes well, someone might move in 3 years, 4 years. It's going to be a long time before that's a reality. So even if it were a possibility, it's pretty far in the future.
Mhm.
Takes a long time for it to go out to bid and get funding and get approved, et cetera. And that protest away. So it will take some.
Can I
Yes, absolutely, Sharon.
You know, I don't know if this is the right time for it, but, you know, in this moment, we need as much support as we can get for the ADUs, because those might in fact be appropriate housing if we can get some of those built. So, you know, hopefully you'll get your community to think about that and come to the public hearing and come to town meeting especially, and, you know, vote your wishes.
With the ADUs, are we looking at mainly single bedroom dwellings?
They may be, they're up to 1,200 square feet.
I mean, we're looking at
Which-
families with more than 2 kids sometimes.
Well, so they're not going to be the answer for everybody.
Yeah.
But part of the, you know, part of the goal is that if you can put some of the people that don't need a whole big house
Mhm.
in a small house,
Right.
maybe
they
the
can
whole
rent their
big
home.
house there for rental,
Mhm.
right? So, you know, the goal is to try to get people into appropriate housing for their needs.
Yeah, I like
Good,
this
Tom.
ADU concept. Let's just reverse that, Becca, and say you're an old timer, and you move into the ADU, and then you're
Yeah,
in
you don't want to do the upkeep on your 4-bedroom house
Yeah,
anymore.
you don't
Right,
want to,
exactly
you know,
right.
4-bedroom is too much. You don't want to get rid of it. You know, the kids don't come anymore to visit. So let me move into a 1,200 square foot dwelling and collect the rent from the
Exactly.
nice size 4-bedroom.
You know, it's possible that there's some natural synergy, that there may be 2, 3, 4 people in the shellfishing community who are in a position to have, they have a space above the garage, or they have land that gives them the right to build. And that we in housing could provide the financial support, which we've done in the past, to help them to construct it. And if you put that in connection with money for an upgrade on the septic, and there's also now, the town was just awarded it's called a block grant, a federal block grant. And Rebecca, I think you have had this, Becky, as you'll be eligible for $40,000 in repairs to your home. And that program is just getting started now, and we'll be issuing the details in the next 30, 60 days. But you could come before either the housing authority or the housing trust and say, shell fishermen need this. If you give us $25,000 per head or per person per ADU, and we can get so much from the block grant, and we can get so much from the septic rebuild. Maybe there are 3 or 4 people in the shellfishing community. And remember, it doesn't have to actually be a house. So it could be, I know there are people in the shellfishing community that have yards where they keep their stuff.
Mhm.
So it may be possible that you could build associated with that, some kind of a residence, or some kind of a business. So the ADU, maybe in the short term meaning a year or two, doesn't help the people today with the emergency, but might be a viable strategy.
That's an interesting thought. Okay.
Yeah. So we together we could put together a package, and maybe Michelle, we could get SPAT to, you know, endorse it, and we could promote it, and get some more donations to it. As again, we have some discretionary money that we could apply to that problem.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Harry, you have something you'd like to get?
No, just quickly, unfortunately, I have to disappear because the selectmen have asked me to look at something for their 6 o'clock meeting tonight.
Okay.
So I have homework yet to do. So if there's something you need from me, you know,
No,
might be a good time to ask.
I just want to identify, for those of you not in the housing community, we have a new organization in town, which is the Wellfleet Affordable Housing Trust, which is essentially a fund of money and a ability to manage that money in the town, and Harry heads that.
Okay.
trust. So we have a lot of expertise really available to you to work on the problem. Elaine, thank you, Harry.
Yep. We're trying to paint a really clear picture of the needs and the statistics of our working families in town. And I'm wondering if Becca, if you or Michelle, not right now, but could provide us with the numbers of people involved in shellfishing, in fishing. We've been working with the Cape Cod Commission to put demographics together, but they're not carving out that whole segment of our workforce. And we know it's a significant one and a very important one. So is there, how could we get that information?
Nancy usually has that information.
Okay, all right. We thought we had you here. We would ask you all.
I usually call her for that. She's got the numbers.
Would she have that for fishing too?
Yes, she should have access to all of the state paperwork, which will tell us exactly who's fishing. And
excellent. Thank you.
Exactly. I think she would probably tell you it's somewhere in the vicinity of 90 grant holders and maybe 150 wild harvesters, something like that. I mean,
that sounds like a pretty good.
pretty high.
Sure.
And then there's also the people who work for them.
Mhm.
So,
And then are you counting families and dependents?
yeah.
So it's a pretty good number.
It's a good chunk of people.
You know, one other thing, Michelle, we are now through the trust trying to find land that we could potentially build on, both for shellfish fishermen and others. But if there are people in the shellfish community who have either own land or some piece of their property and have an interest in selling it, we would be happy to talk to them about it. Again, it could be mutually beneficial. We can't figure out a way to do a dedicated shellfishing building project and still have it fit under the fair housing laws. But we are trying to massage what we can to see if we can't come up with some program like that.
We appreciate your efforts.
So far, it hasn't amounted to much, Becca. But it's not that we have a tin ear. We just may not be able to get it done. So, yes, Elaine.
Well, I just want to point out that the only way dedicated housing could be done is with all private funding. So, I mean, there could be a way for SPAT to look at purchasing land and having some kind of lottery for, it's just that to do that specifically, it has to be all private funding, no town, state, or federal. But it's not impossible. We heard an amazing presentation from Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah.
And they have had success, incredible success with a kind of philanthropic effort to produce specific housing for certain needs. So it's not impossible, but it's something, to think about.
Elizabeth, go ahead. You're muted.
Figure this out. Okay. So me and my husband are shell fishermen, as some of you know. And so this is a subject that's very dear to us, of course, and many of our friends. And we have been in this boat now where, we're finally getting somewhere with our grant. We got it started when our kids were small, and so we've very much been experiencing this, and now the market being the way it is. I guess what I'm thinking about is if there can be some kind of grant funding available through SPAT or through the housing partnership, where you can apply and you qualify depending on that you make most of your income, or most of your income through shellfishing. You can prove this, and even if you don't qualify now for these certain programs, that you can still kind of prove that you this is, you rely on this income, and if you have, a family depending on it as such, like if you could qualify for maybe more financial help through, the size of your family, the size of your household, how many people depend on it.
You remind me of two things. Many of you know we have the buy down program. And that's where we give a grant. It's the luck of the drawer who gets it, depending on how many applicants we have. But that is specifically restricted to 80% of AMI, 80% of the income. So
Right.
35 to 70. However, we also have a program called down payment assistance, which is up to 100%, Elaine? 100% of AMI? Yes. So that goes a little higher, and that's where we give a grant. It's actually a loan but you don't have to pay it back as long as you stay in your house.
Right.
And that can give you up to $20,000 to help with the purchase of the home. And we have had some shell fishermen who have made use of that program, and we've also had 2 shell fishermen families who have gotten the buy down. So it's not impossible, but it's not one that we can dedicate to shell fishing.
For shell fishermen, right?
Right.
Yeah.
As opposed to something that came from SPAT, where maybe we could partner with SPAT to do some kind of a program that is mutually beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, with the down payment assistance, if we had, I mean, we haven't had to have a lottery for that. It's one person has come at a time and we've had the money, we can do it. If we were able to do our 20,000, but if it was a shell fishing family, if SPAT could match that, that could be a significant help. We'd have to run all these things by legal eagles, but.
Right. And we could change the rules, not on the fly, but if it had a material effect, we could increase the limit on down payment assistance if it made a difference. Because the reality, it's tragic, but the reality is we just gave a grant of $175,000. Seems like a huge amount of money to help a first-time home buyer. I think there's no chance in hell that they're going to find a place to buy that they can afford making what they do at 80% of AMI. They can't carry a big mortgage. And the state puts a maximum on the price of the house that they can buy. So, and which is roughly in the 350 to 475 range. And there's just not a lot in Wellfleet these days that's available.
Nothing in Wellfleet like that.
Yeah.
No.
So I question going forward, either we have to revamp the buy down program or look for alternative ways. And maybe it's through this buy down or through this down payment assistance. Tom, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Elaine.
No, go ahead.
I'm just going to throw some wild idea out.
No, sure.
Me too.
Have we ever thought about going to the National Seashore and bringing along the federal agency that tells us we need to be 10% of affordable housing, and just have them sit at the table and talk about our struggles and say to the National Seashore, give us 50 acres so we can start building homes for our shell fishermen or folks that work in the restaurant business, et cetera, and see what their response would be. Crazy idea, but
No.
I've seen crazier things come out of the federal government.
We've been down that road. Elaine, you want to take that one or?
Well, I mean, I think it's something that should be done again. I took so many walks this winter through seashore property, through acres and acres of scrub pine. And I was like, I'm going to write to Carolyn Kennedy and say, you know what, your dad did something amazing. Now you need to do something for us. Ideally, I mean, we have approached the seashore about the town-owned land in the seashore next to the COA, and they weren't really forthcoming. They said, spend the money and show us a plan, and then we'll talk about it. But I think it's a discussion that should be had. I don't think we should say no.
I'm sorry. Lee.
It really would take federal, we would have to talk to our federal senators and representatives to, I think, have any clout. But I think it's something worth trying.
Yeah.
So there are 3 acres that the town owns that's in the seashore. There's the land opposite the COA. That vacant land that we have tried for years to use for housing. And even though it's town-owned land, it's in the seashore, and the restriction is that it can only be used for "quote unquote" a municipal purpose.
Right.
So we have yet
Well,
to.
and
I'm sorry, okay, Sharon.
I was just gonna say, and then there's the landing strip.
Yes,
Right.
well, that's that's a whole other. But this is perfectly good land, and we have access to it. We own it. It has water, town water there. It would make a great place to put some homes, but so far we have been unsuccessful in freeing it up. Yes, Elaine.
My other idea is that we really need a nonprofit working on this too, because nonprofits can do a lot more. And that's what the Vineyard Housing Trust has done as a nonprofit. And they have been incredibly successful. I mean, with all the money that is coming to Wellfleet, I think it's something, if we found people that were really willing, it might be another avenue for more flexibility. That's another wild idea.
All right.
Well, Michelle, why don't you tell the team that what you talked about at your last board meeting?
Well, I reported on a conversation that Tom and I had. We kind of discussed all of this. He was looking for what funds, what vehicles were available now, and I said, well, SPAT has and it's really for basic living expenses that through the Lower Cape outreach, and there's probably only 20,000 left there under that, I'm sure. The Fishing Partnership Services, and then the Cape Cod Commercial Fishermen's Alliance. Those are 3 different things, but they're, I think, mostly all geared for COVID relief and basic living expenses. And so, I heard what he was saying, and I've certainly been aware of this housing crisis for a long time. And I reported on that conversation that I would come to this meeting and learn more. And there was definitely interest in keeping, learning more and finding out, what can be done. So there was an opportunity there. That's all I really have to say about it. But, maybe a group, little contingent of this committee at some point, especially if a plan was developed that, you had some of these opportunities already spelled out, or if they could be retooled a little bit to make them more accessible to people. And if there was a plan for moving forward, like Elaine said, to seek other funding. Like, I wonder if the CDP could help us to find some funding. I mean, one of the other stats that I use a lot is just to put it home to people, is that about 25% of the community makes their living from shellfishing, and that's a large part of the community. So in that regard, couldn't it be there some economic development funds or some sort of federal funds for that? And if, SPAT could be the one to help find and apply for and receive that money, maybe that's some way we could work. But yeah, so I think,
Michelle, we meet weekly with CDP
okay.
about ideas, but maybe we could set one of those meetings aside or dedicate it to, what could we do together on this, and is there other sources of money? I wanted to throw out another idea, not a wild idea, but the ADU bylaw, if it passes, it's not limited to one ADU per. So as long as you have the land, you can put multiple. So you could theoretically put 3 or 4 ADU type apartments on a piece of property and set it up for shell fishermen and women. Do you say shell fishermen to include women, or you also say women?
Well, the way, I mean, so Elizabeth just said it like that, but what I've been trying to do to be non-gender specific,
Right,
I've been saying shellfish farmers and wild harvesters.
okay. Shellfish farmers and wild.
It's a big
farmers.
mouthful, I know, but
Right.
that's what I've been trying to write so that it's non-gender specific.
Okay. Elizabeth, I think Elizabeth was saying goodbye, but
Oh,
are you still there, Elizabeth? No, I think we lost her. Okay, so I think in terms of next steps, we would be happy to come, to one of your meetings, either at SPAT or the Shellfish Advisory, and talk about it. Maybe we could get a group together from representatives from both the housing and the shellfishing community, and really go past the idle talk of it and say what specific ideas make sense to pursue and how much money do we need.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Very nice. Thank you.
No, thank you
just
guys so
gonna say
much.
one-
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure,
Just because I know you'll probably leave this meeting. Of course, you're welcome to stay, but one thing that we'll be we're discussing is something that we're planning for this summer, which is Housing Angels, which will involve, it's really more about awareness raising. It's about trying to make everybody see that that the housing issues affect everybody, from local year-round residents to summer visitors to second homeowners. We're all affected because our economy is going to be at risk if we can't house people who work here. And so because of that, it's everybody's responsibility, or everybody should be supporting housing efforts. And so we're doing a whole host of different activities all through the summer. So things like Story Slam and open mic and some things in art galleries and a bunch of different stuff. Jason and Elizabeth have offered to host like a couple of shelling out for housing, right? So like just raw bars. Yeah. Yeah. So you might think of other ways that you all can get your folks involved, whether it's raw bars or whatever. Just because we want it in everybody's. We don't want anybody to be able to walk through town and not see that we need their support on housing issues.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, very good.
All right. Anything else anyone would like to add? So you guys kick around, we'll do the same thing, and then let's set up another meeting to talk about, how do we really turn some of these ideas into realities.
Great.
Good. Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for your time today, guys. Really
Okay,
appreciate it.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for having
much for
us.
having me.
Sure
Thanks
thing.
for having
Take
us, Gary. Elaine.
Yeah.
Nice meeting you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right. So on the housing side, you want to, Sharon, do you want to talk about the summer fund, or you want, go ahead.
Sure.
Okay.
So I guess you sent out that letter, right, Gary, that my update?
I may have misunderstood. I thought you told me not to, and to send out the announcement of the letter to the editor and about the ADU. So I may have gotten my
really?
letters, I may have gotten my quote unquote letters mixed up.
Okay, well, I did send out a letter to people who have said that they'd be involved. So like Susan and Elizabeth, and I thought you all got a copy of it, but I'm certainly willing to send it out to you just so you can see the different activities that people are, that we're talking about. And it's still in the planning stage, but some people have stepped up and agreed to take responsibility for certain things, like Lee Witherspoon is going to be doing. She's going to reach out to various yoga instructors in town and do it, you know, and suggesting that they might want to donate like one class in the whole summer. But if all the different yoga instructors did it, that might be one class in each week. That was what we're calling oming for home. So, you know, basically it's not very much money, but again, it's just like awareness building, right? So maybe it's $30, $40 from each yoga instructor, but that's 10, 12, 15 people that are walking away going, housing, you know, we need to support housing. And that's the goal. That's what we want. And so some of the other things you heard me mention to the shellfishing group, another possibility is, I don't know if any of you saw the slideshows that they were putting on Pres Hall, like at Valentine's Day and another time, I don't remember when, but Lee also offered to run the slide projector if someone came up with a slideshow. So that's something when I think about. It's not about making people feel guilty. So I want it to be like, you know, I don't know. We need ideas. We need someone to think about how we could put a slideshow that people getting their ice cream could walk past, you know, Pres Hall in the evening and see a slideshow about interesting Wellfleet houses and the people that live in them, the people who maybe need help. So anyway, that's kind of what we're doing. And Susan, I'm still hoping that when you get back to Wellfleet, you're.
I'm back. I got back yesterday.
Oh, you are. Well, I'll be hitting you up.
Please.
You know what, Sharon, we need to, at this point, identify the 3 or 4 things that we are going to do and really put a focus on that. So I don't know the right answer, what it is, but whether it's Story Slam or whether it's the slideshow or whether it's the art or whatever it may be, and put someone responsible for each one of those.
I agree.
Yeah, so that we move it from the concept stage to the,
yep,
all right, here are the things that we really need to do.
I agree.
Go ahead.
So I think Ann Suggs, who isn't here, has offered, you know, like to think about gallery space and some place to display our brochures and maybe, you know, a beautiful house picture of the week kind of thing, either at their gallery, but also talking to other gallery owners and seeing if that can't be kind of through the town. And Ann said she'd take care of that. And Lee is doing the oming for homes and would be the slideshow. And now that Susan's back, I'm hoping she can help me brainstorm, you know, like finding other people. Like Susan had previously said that she might be willing to talk to Pres Hall about setting up a story slam. And
yeah,
so we're moving that direction.
I'm definitely willing, and I plan to. Following my return is Janet's return. She's been away for a couple weeks, much delayed vacation from, you know, a year and a half ago. But as soon as she comes back, fresh and something, I think the Story Slam needs more than their space. I think the key is going to be getting the word out. And I personally have no idea, even barely, what a Story Slam is. So what I'm hoping to do is get her or one of her staff to help us do it. And then we can obviously have the major role in getting the right people who are willing to talk and, you know, a lot of the content, but the place and the getting the word out, I'm hoping we can enlist their help.
Yeah.
So, with that regard, the Story Slam and some of the other ones, the slide presentation, have a life beyond the event. You know, we'll have that as a recording, or we'll have those slides as something we can use again and again to illustrate the issue. So, you know, I think it has great potential. We've gone. I tried to get it under an hour. but it doesn't work. But I'm wondering, given the ADU on the 5th, the ADU hearing at the planning board, and given the work we need to do on this, should we have another meeting mid-May as opposed to the end of May to really talk about, and between now and then, one of our goals will be to really put together a calendar and a detailed plan for the summer fun. I'm looking at like Thursday, the 13th. Does that make sense to folks? I don't have anything invested in the 13th. It can be any day, but
Yeah,
throw it out there.
unfortunately, I'm again not going to be around.
When are you available, Susan?
For a year and a half, I was available every day.
Right. I absolutely resemble that remark because we are trying to go out again, but
I am available the first week in May, and then yeah, mostly I'm not available. I'm not available from the 7th to the 16th. So that's really that 1 week that you pick.
so we could do it Thursday, the 6th. That's 2 weeks from today. Again,
I
it's
can
not-
do it. Yeah, I'm here then.
Sharon, what do you think?
I can do it. I don't know what kind of energy I will have. It sort of depends on how the planning board hearing goes.
Yeah, so,
I may be under a rock somewhere. I don't know.
right. I know they have a tendency to beat anyone down. I shouldn't say it that way, but it is.
No, but they have strong opinions and that they should.
But I think the focus of the next meeting will be on the planning for summer activities.
Yes. I think that would be great. That will give me a little more focus because
Okay. So
it's going in and out.
when do you want to do it?
Well, I'd like to have Susan's involvement. So I would say either the 6th or the 20th.
All right, well, and Susan, you say you are not back until the 20th, or you are?
No, I'm back the 16th.
Okay.
So
So I defer to you guys. Do you want to wait until the 20th or do you want to do it on the 6th?
Why don't we do it the 20th? Because I think my energy will be a little bit better at that point. And
I'll have a chance. I'm sorry. I'll have a chance. You go.
I was just gonna say, I will like keep Susan in, the email loop, and she won't be like, she won't be under a rock.
No,
So
I'm totally available by email and phone, and I just can't. It's more grandchildren visiting. I have no other excuse, but I just can't commit to 4 o'clock on some afternoon because
right. No, I know. So if I send you an email, you'll respond. And
I think the charge has to be to come back with, here are specific plans. Here, here's how we're doing. Here are the 4 or 5. I don't know. You decide. You guys decide that 4 or 5 activities. Maybe talk to SPAT and see if they want to do something together for Oyster Fest. But we have more time for that. But
I will definitely come back with more information about the Story Slam, which is sort of good. I feel like I've taken on. And on that, I have one quick question. Have we ever sort of partnered with Habitat? I sort of see them as part of a Story Slam thing.
We have partnered with Habitat a lot, but it's almost like 2 different stacks, because really we're raising money for X, or raising money or consciousness for X, and they're raising money for Habitat. And so we can certainly share the story part of it, but then the question is, how do we do the money and
well, in terms of the Story Slam, we're raising.
Right.
raising awareness about the needs and the successes in Wellfleet.
Yeah.
There's certainly, the 2 new habitat families have been a huge success.
Right.
And
I think they can speak for sure tell their story.
Yeah.
But as opposed to having it co-sponsored with Habitat, I don't know, Elaine, what do you think?
yeah,
You're muted, Elaine.
Yeah, I think that some of the Habitat has really helped some of their people come forward with their stories. And so I think it would just be an offer to any of them to talk, but I don't think partnering, I think we want to focus.
Not co-sponsored.
Not
Yeah.
co-sponsor.
no, and I wasn't necessarily thinking of that, but they are.
Oh, no, I think they'd be great to talk. Maybe we get somebody from the shellfishing community to speak.
Yeah,
So it's a combination of a good story, but a good storyteller.
right.
And any of us, if you have an interesting story about housing. Sure. All right, so Sharon, if you can come back on the 20th with more of a detailed plan for what, and also tell us what you need from us. I need 3 volunteers to be at this location and to do this, this, and this. Whatever it may be. Maybe Judy will do a quilt.
I was thinking about that.
Yeah, I mean, that was
That would
very
be fun.
successful. Judy has done quilts in the past that we have auctioned off, and Judy has done quilts for Habitat.
Nice.
So no, that's been very successful. Painting, and you're doing a lot in the gallery, so maybe there is something they can do. All right.
Well, I'm still working on buttons.
And buttons, right? I don't mean to short shift
Can
any.
you see it? Says, would you, could you, ADU?
That's wonderful.
Send one to Jerry.
Yeah,
all right.
Good.
I've completely lost the track of the meeting, but Elaine, is there anything we want to say on 95 Lawrence?
Not really. I actually have to leave for another meeting. Just that
Okay.
we're honing in on the last little details to get the RFP out. So
Super. And we do have
Hang
a
in there,
meeting.
Elaine.
We do have a meeting, our first meeting next week with Mass Housing Partnership about how do we reorganize the housing efforts. This is the technical grant we got that came out of our establishing the housing trust. So we are moving forward on that. We have, I'm sad to report, we have looked at several pieces of land that we thought we might be able to potentially buy for affordable housing. And either we think it's worth X and they think it's worth 10X, or it's so torturously without access or have deed issues, we find one that we can even make a viable offer on. So we continue to look at that. But if anybody knows of any land that someone has and might be interested in selling it, we're definitely interested in talking to them. Yes, Sharon.
How does someone end up owning a piece of land that has no access?
There's no one answer to that. Some of it has to do with historical. They got passed down to them. Some of them have bought it and think they can do something with it, and turns out they can't. Some of them have a deed for it and have a plan for access, a right of way, but it isn't viable. So it just happens.
Well, it seems like there's parcels that developments have grown up around and somehow were allowed to build around that land in such a way that there was no more access. So I just don't understand how that happens.
Yeah, I mean, some of the land that is available, just take Howard Court for an example, or the subdivision by Payne's Campground.
Yeah.
You know, those are relatively new subdivisions, but they have restrictive housing covenants on them. So,
No, I know that. I'm
right.
just thinking of one parcel, well, 3 parcels, but 2 of them are owned by the same family up off of, in Wellfleet Woods area. It's like 10 acres.
If you know
But,
somebody that
you
has
know, I
10
mean,
acres that'd be interested in selling it, we're interested in talking to them.
No, I don't know if they're interested in selling it, but I'm just looking at it and thinking that the access is quite challenging to it. And so, once
And-
again,
And it may be that we in affordable housing can use it and no one else can.
That would
So
be-
there is a possibility. So I would say if any piece of property that you can think of, you don't even have to know the people, but if you can describe it, we'd be willing to do bird dog, who owns it and whether it's a viable possibility or not.
Sharon,
Okay.
when you say access is challenging, what do you mean by that? Is it steep or is it?
No, where it doesn't have enough frontage.
yeah,
So, you know, it doesn't,
You can't
Some-
construct a road?
Well,
some
I
of
don't
them
know.
are so restrictive, Jan, that, but we looked at one, it was a 2-acre parcel that was then connected to a 3/4 acre parcel. The 3/4 acre parcel had the access and the 2-acre had no access, and they were somehow gonna, you know, it turned out because of the boom in land prices as well as houses, it's just viable, and it's not viable.
Is
Viable.
anyone else losing Gary?
Yeah,
Oh.
we're losing you, Gary.
I'm sorry. All I'm saying is that there are a lot of details related to the land. Don't get me wrong, we're willing to rock. So if you rock, send me, I'll be more than happy to take a look at it.
I will.
Okay. All right. We've been at it for an hour and a half, so I'm going to suggest that we entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting with the understanding that our next meeting will be 20th. I forgot that. Is 4 o'clock still a good time for people? You want to make it later? Or doesn't matter?
4's good.
Don't make it later.
Don't make it later? Okay. So our next meeting will be scheduled for 4 o'clock on the 20th.
Okay.
I hate those meetings, those, 7 o'clock meetings. I'm
Yes,
like,
I know.
I have no energy left.
I move we adjourn.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Dan. Thank you,
I
everyone.
second it.
Good night. Good
Good
meeting.
night. Bye-bye. Thank you, Gary.
Take care. Bye-bye.